I sincerely feel very proud to open this conference and this session with such wonderful leaders and people who think big. And I would like to enhance the temperature of your sense of being, for we are talking about innovations and about very long horizon. And 2 years I've spent to study in detail the forecasts which will be true for 20, 50 years, the next step of our history. And we have two opportunities: either the gigantic breakthrough into the future, or the sunset of our civilizations. And I'd like also to return to you with the idea. Those challenges I will be talking about, these are the challenges which are realistically have values, and we need to resolve those challenges. And such challenges we never met before in our history, and they require creative mind and innovative approach. And Clark said that any developed technology is similar to magic. We don't know how it happened. If we went back to the 20th century and told the people who lived there that today we are 7 billion and we are providing food to 7 billion, they wouldn't believe. In the beginning of the 20th century, the Malthus concept was prevailing, that it is impossible to increase the fertility of terrain, and he envisaged hunger in the future. Somehow, some innovative scientists of the last, Haber and Bosch, in the beginning of the 20th century, they made a miracle. They invented the technology of industrial production of nitrogen fertilizers, which made it possible to increase the fertility of lands. And this innovation, just this innovation, made it possible to feed the population, which grew from 1.8 billion to 8 billion people. And you can see the growth of the use of fertilizers, especially starting from 1950, and China now puts into the ground 15 times more fertilizers than Russia, because they have realistic problems of only almost 2 billion people, and innovation in fertilizers is depleting. And during the next 50 or 40 years, United Nations predicts the growth of population up to 10 billion people. And a more important trend, all analytical experts, they predict that a new middle class is growing, because the economy of China was growing during the last 20 years, Brazil, India, and many countries of Africa. And in 10 years, along with 2 billion of middle class, there will be a 3.2, and we are looking for the number of 5 billion people, and they would like to live on European and American standards. They want to have an automobile, they want to have food, excellent and diet food. And when people switch from poor food to meat and milk diet, naturally it requires more efforts in agriculture. And look for the figure. The next 40 years will demand the same amount of granary as it was created during the year 8 or 10,000 years of the history of mankind. And this is up to 2050. And that's why during the last several years, the politicians and experts are thinking how to feed 10 billion people. We don't have free lands, and those which are used are being depleted and degrading, and they require more mineral fertilizers. At the same time, we know the hazardous effect of pesticides, and now we have 5 times more nitrogen in the soil, and we don't know how to stop it, for it changes the chemical content of rivers and oceans, but we have to resolve the issue how to feed 9 billion people and the growing middle class. And three most important innovations of the last 19th century created automobile, developed electricity and all electrical gadgets like coolers, refrigerators, and televisions. And during the next 40 years, we plan to double the consumption of electric energy and let alone the switch from today's oil fuel to electrical power supply, and maybe another 1.5 billion of automobiles will be acquired by the population, and it means that we have to double also conventional oil and gas resources, and that looks like a golden age of civilization if we didn't have a problem with the resources. And the problems which we felt with the climate in the end of the 20th, the question arose whether it is possible to develop on the existing base the energy and power supply industry. Bill Gates conducted the research himself, and we don't know how to replace hydrocarbons and what will be the next source of power supply. We need to find a miracle, and we have only 20 years. The question of resources is being discussed for quite a long period of time, but I would like to give you one more analog. We have 3 barrels of resources. The first barrel has been opened for long, and these are easy acquirable resources. We have the technology, and during the 20th century the price for resources went down, and actually the first barrel is about to be over. The second barrel, these are, let's say, poor resources. We have to process them with the harder effort. And what are we going to spend the resource of this second barrel to create technologies to approach the third barrel and to create a more efficient and more sustainable economy which will not depend on the resources. And this is the greatest challenge which we face. So food, climate, and resources, these are the major challenges which will interfere and will bother us for the near future. And those innovations which do not take into account this factor is a waste of money. So we need to reinvent all base technologies, all key technologies which provide food, energy, and transport have been invented in the end of 19th, beginning of the 20th century. It was a miracle. From 1880 and up to 1920, everything was made. Only 50 innovators managed to do that. And our task is, if we believe that we could feed and give water and to give lodging to 9 billion people, so we need to do the same, because we cannot extrapolate the old technologies for 9 billion people, for they do not work. They well, enhance the content of nitrogen and CO2, and their efficiency has ceased. And new innovations should be serving 9 billion people and should be, let's say, spread among 6 or 8 billion people shortly, and they are supposed to be more effective. And here is the pyramid of innovations. All innovations, they are concentrated on top. They are called gadgets. And at the bottom, this is coal. And electricity is generated by a turbine which burns coal or gas. And efficiency of turbine is at the limit. And we are generating a tremendous amount of gadgets. And these are not innovations. These are gadgets. We need innovations in the base. We need to understand with what we are going to replace coal and how to replace the turbine. And this is extremely complicated task. So Mercedes-Benz and other people which could do 100 years ago. We need a total economy, a recycling, and if we adopt this as a decision, what we are going to do next dozens of years, we will need several dozens of years, and energy switch from one resource to another takes 30 or 40 or 50 years. We develop solar, wind energy for 40 years, and only 2% now in this energy balance. And how could we do that? And one of the best ideas which I found, which was expressed by Genadam Koshla, venture capitalists, they should bear high risks, much higher than we assume today. We have to create 100 funds of so-called black swans. They would invest 100 technologies each, and we could find 10 new Googles in energy and in food supplies, and only that could save the world. And I believe that there is a difference between Silicon Valley and Russia and Manhattan projects like agency like ARP, which stimulates the advanced technologies, but the role of the state is to correctly assign the goal and the target and to create the rules which will support innovations and will stop those technologies which lead to high expenditures. And the technologies themselves, they cannot solve the problem as they are. And Dennis Meadows and Bill Gates are using these formulas because they show the scope of the use of any resource on the planet and CO2 emissions. And there are two components of this formula, 3 and 4. Resources and efficiency. The first component is the number, and the second is the consumer activity of the people. And I have demonstrated in the beginning that the consumer activity for the next dozen of years, because it will grow dramatically, for it is middle class. And if we don't think what kind of social innovations we are going to have, how to change the culture of consumption, how to change the paradigm of success, which is based on the car, on the apartment. We can't solve those challenges which we are facing today. And in the end, as I'm an optimist, I would like to use the phrase of Andy Grohl, you think about unthinkable. For we can do that. Thank you for your attention.